The presenters are going to introduce themselves, but you will see on the program that Jennifer Gibson's name is not on there. She works for the federal government, and we were in that little place where we had that little break in government service. So we weren't sure if she could participate or not, but she's a trooper and she showed up, and so we're very fortunate to have her with us today. So without further ado, we're going to start with you, Jennifer, and you can take it from here.
Thank you. Yes, once the president signed the budget, I was allowed to come. So, other than that, Alex had I may not be coming here. I'm going to add, I actually worked for Park and Planning for years. I was their visual arts person. I worked for Barbara Funk and was on the panel that Paris Glendenning formed and wrote the policies for public art. So
Nice to see you again.
it's a program with which I'm familiar and was always amazed at the extent of support for the arts in Prince George's County. That's unlike most places around the country. So in that way, it's extraordinarily fortunate that you've had public and political support for the arts. Now, the national program, I went from Park and Planning to the General Services Administration. And I think people are often surprised that the federal government has a robust public art program, but it's one that started in the 1850s. So when you look, our precedent is the U.S. Capitol, where artists were hired to ornament the Capitol building. I'm the Director of Art and Architecture and Fine Arts for GSA, which means basically I have a museum that's all over the country with no guards except CBP or U.S. Marshals, things like that. But I don't have anybody who's out there looking at the art, making sure it's okay. So it's a challenge. We have commissioned over the years about 500 art and architecture works since the 1970s. And the Calder Flamingo in Chicago is probably the work that we see as the first in the modern era of GSA's public art commissioning. We also have a collection of about 27,000 works on loan to institutions around the country. These are largely all the New Deal works. So it's a vast collection that we track and take care of. Today, when the federal government is either modernizing a building or constructing a new building, we have 0.5% of the estimated construction costs to commission artwork. And it is a tiny percentage and much less than what you find in most public art programs. However, federal buildings are expensive buildings. And so our art budgets, we tend to not commission work under $100,000 because it's just the effort in doing it and in trying to create large civic scale works for less than that is pretty difficult, particularly when you're working in venues all over the country. But the budgets go up to maybe $1.5 million or so. Each project may have multiple commissions, but often we do one commission. The caveat is the work must be in a public area of the building, so it's someplace where people have access. Now, someplace like the CIA, you're not going to get in. But within the CIA, the people who are there would be able to see the work. And it's also permanently installed. For each project, we form a separate panel. The panel advises the government. And the purpose is to really try to create a short list of artists, any of whom would be appropriate for the project. And so we have, if we're building a courthouse, one of the judges is on the panel. The lead designer is on the panel. And then we bring in a community member and a community arts person, as well as a member from our National Registry of Art Peers, who tend to be curators at institutions around the country. just to show you an example, some of the works we've commissioned more recently, starting in the 90s, at the Moakley Courthouse in Boston, we have Ellsworth Kelly's series of the Boston panels, 21 panels. I can say we have no official style. We have no preference of materials. We do not direct artists to do specific things. Artists are selected on the basis of their past work, and the artist who is offered a commission does no work until they are under contract with us. So we are looking, the way you would hire an architect on the basis of their prior work, we are hiring artists that way. Once they have a contract, then we start the discussions. They go make a site visit and learn about the project, and they then offer us their ideas. Just to show you the range of kinds of materials, Leo Villarreal's work in El Paso. Some of the work is quite traditional, a series of murals in the Tuscaloosa courthouse that are really about the history of that area. And in fact, as the artist was finishing the commission, the tornado that went through Tuscaloosa had occurred, and so he modified one of the murals to include reference to that because it had been such a dramatic event for the city. Adili Donald Odita in Orlando. This is an instance where we were doing a modernization of a building, and so the artist was able to work with the architects as it was being modernized and came up with this. I can't tell you how hard it was to convince people it was okay that he was going to etch into this new paneling and put paint directly on it, but we received the support from the agency, and he was able to do that work. We also do border stations. This is a work up in Blaine, Washington. Again, completely different things, and this is in Van Buren, Maine. A work that's all about all of the things that the special state signs and mottos. The moose is the state animal. To more recently completed work at the San Ysidro Land Port of Entry, and Mi Yun's piece, which is actually tied into each of the roads going through the land port of entry, so that when a car passes through, light goes from that point and out across the canopy. There are, I think, 64 lanes going through here. And another view of it. And closer to here, just up New Hampshire Avenue, wanted to show you some examples of work that we had commissioned there. Doha Sa's screen at FDA. This is the shared use building that's at the center of the campus. And his work is actually on the second level of the building. And reads as a quite large abstract piece. When you look at it closely, it's thousands of figures. He also created some that have little FDA logos on their chests. And it's the idea of society is built upon the unity of the many. As you go from the shared use and look down the campus, we have a series of works by Jenny Holzer. And each of the benches is inscribed with text from maybe legal cases, statements from FDA, all sorts of things that relate directly to FDA. And what's always interesting is when people see things like this, including the FDA, they sometimes think, oh, this is a very radical idea, and then they find out it's their own words. She used, as an example, a survey that had been sent out to employees in the 1960 to assess their attitudes about things. And when FDA initially read this and said, oh my, what is this? And we said, it's your own survey. So it's interesting to have people reflect on that. Plus, they go out and they sit on the benches. At the end of that central area, Matthew Ritchie created a garden called this garden at this hour. And it's really unites many different things. And he worked with FDA scientists. I should say, we never say to an artist, this is what you have to do. Here's the content. They do not have to illustrate anything. It's often through their going back and forth with us and with the client agency that they develop ideas that engage the community. Here he's dealing with basically the paving, the plants, and structures, all of which are based upon different molecular structures and carbon as the basis of life, and then looking at plants and the evolution of plants over time, and the medicinal qualities of plants, and the survival of them, so that this is a garden that keeps shifting over time. And so in an instance like this, we are dealing with the artists, the fabricators, plus landscape architects and horticulturists to not only establish the work, but then to care for it in the future. And we do develop maintenance plans for every artwork. Alan McCollum is another of the artists at FDA, and he did this series, the Shapes Project, where he did 300 shapes, just to show how symbols can continue to be elaborated, so that you come up with hundreds of thousands of different forms based on some basic shapes. And another work that is there is Inigo Mangalo Avalle's prototype for re-entry. And there the FDA site, the White Oak campus, was the World War II location for the naval warfare surface weapon systems or something like that. Anyway, they have the biggest wind tunnel around. And so he was able to work with the scientists at the wind tunnel, and he took Brancusi's bird in space. He made a model and ran it through the wind tunnel to see what would happen, and then he created this large piece that hangs in the atrium of one of the buildings. To participate in our program, as I said, since 1974, we've had about 500 commissions, so we don't build that many federal buildings day to day. And when projects occur, it takes years from the time Congress passes a bill until the project is completed. But any artist who is a citizen, permanent resident of the United States is eligible, and basically everything's online. You just go to www.gsa.gov/art and architecture. There you will see our policies and procedures and a registry form that you submit along with images of your work and a resume and basically a description of what the images are. We then include that work in the National Artists Registry. To be considered for a project, you must be in the registry. So when a panel's first meeting, if there are artists that the panel would like us to consider and they're not in the registry, we get in touch with those artists and say, would you like to be considered? We look at the registry as our pool of candidates. And once you're in it, we are assuming that you are interested in being considered for projects. We don't then contact you in the future and say, do you want us to include you when we do the panel for the Calexico Land Port of Entry? We will just be using that registry to draw potential candidates who meet the criteria that have been established by the panel. And you'll see in the policies and procedures that we list the criteria. But basically, this is a federal procurement, so there are a very set series of things that we have to be evaluating and determining that how we're spending federal funds is appropriate and that the government is getting value for what it is spending. So it's not an easy program to deal with, and but I think that we have been commissioning some wonderful artists and adding to the federal legacy of artworks. And we take care of the work after it's there. We have national conservation projects and hope that the public enjoys the work. I should also say, once you are in the registry, you won't hear from us. And we don't call and say, well, we're going to include you in this potential pool. Instead, if you are a shortlisted finalist, then we get in touch with you, and that's when you would be asked to provide additional information, such as what references, value of past projects, and complexity, because we have to be able to justify that this is an artist who, if we're going to give somebody a $500,000 commission, we have to be able to justify that the artist's work can be valued at $500,000, and they have worked at projects of equal complexity. So if you have any questions, I will be around, so please don't hesitate to ask, and we encourage participation.
Thank you, and we will take, yes, thank you very much for that presentation, because oftentimes people are not aware that there is a federal program. It's been in existence for a long time, and it does really great work. We will take questions at the end. There is a microphone in the center aisle, so think of your questions, and at the end we'll have you come up and ask your questions. Sandy Bellamy, want to introduce yourself a little bit and then talk about your program and how artists can interface with your program?
Okay, thank you, Alec. I see a couple of our artists here today. We have a Present for Art program at the DC Department of General Services. Like many other state general services, it is the construction wing for the city, and it integrates artists into the DC Modernization Program. The DC Modernization Program began with Mayor Adrian Fenty probably about 15 years ago, 12 years ago. So about 5 of those years, artists have been a major component of the new construction in Washington, D.C. Schools, recreation centers. Our first project was for a women's shelter. So those are the 3 primary clients that we've been serving under this program. For those of you who do work in DC, there are other commissioning agencies as well. You have the library system, they do their own commissions. You have Department of Transportation, DPW, DC Commission. So there are lots of different entities in DC where artists can find work. I'll just flip through this. I had some videos, but I don't think that they're necessary for the presentation, but that's just one of our artists, Allison Sigathy, who did a drop, the raindrop installation over at Roosevelt. We've done a lot of commissions. Our commissions are not the big $1 million commissions. Our average 3D exterior work can range from $50,000 to above. 2D work, probably around 25 and above, depending on the size, but can go all the way up to 100. So I consider our program kind of like a WPA program. You're not going to have the huge commissions, but these commissions are good for artists to be able to expand their portfolio, pay the rent. So I consider them kind of bread and butter commissions because we have the commissions consistently, and we have a lot of commissions every year. So now we have an application out for 26 commissions. Plus we have direct commissions on top of that. So this, if you're interested in applying, brought some flyers that have the URL. This year we have one application. So it's one online application where you can apply for everything at the same time. So you don't have to do separate applications anymore. Just as a note, you will have to upload your portfolio images into a PowerPoint template. That's the only thing that you have to do in addition to the online application. I'll work on that next year so you can just upload your images. But there's only but so much I could have gotten out of Octo this year. But this here is just a list of all the different schools and shelters and recreation centers that we've done, we are pretty busy. A lot of times, some people are amazed at the quality of art that we get at our commission amount. It's important for our program to prioritize and patronize our local artists first and foremost. More than 70% of our artists are from DC, and I'm very proud about that. Initially, when we began the program, most of the artists coming from the Washington area would be applying for 2D, but now we have, as we have worked with artists who were predominantly 2D or studio artists to translate their work in a permanent environment or large-scale environment, we have more and more Washington artists applying for our three-dimensional and suspended categories. That's a unique, I think one unique thing about the Percent for Art program being at DGS, it helps artists who may not have had a lot of public art experience because we are the construction agency. Every project has its architect, its engineer, landscape designer, and all of the subs. So we have the resources available to enable artists without a lot of public art experience to, again, translate their work into a large-scale public environment and connect artists with fabricators and installers, engineers. So don't be afraid to apply. I always say, if you have a strong design and concept, strong form, we can work with you. Like one of our more recent installs over the summer was one of the Burning Man artists, Davis McCarty. And he's very Burning Man. I'm like, Davis, this is a beautiful concept, but we're not going to burn it as an effigy at the end of this project. We need to strengthen this up. And so here comes our team of engineers and our subs to help him. So we're not going to turn an artist away because they're a younger artist or newer to the field of public artists. We will connect them with the resources that they need to be able to have a permanent installation. So I'll just flip through here. These are just some of the images. So we do all kinds of artwork. It can be on glass. I think I recognize that woman down there on the floor, Valerie. She was doing a beautiful mosaic for us at Blue Senior High School. Three-dimensional, two-dimensional, suspended, figurative, abstract, multimedia, just all kinds of things. And I think that may be on the far left bottom, someone working on architectural art glass through one of the studios in Germany. So there are lots of different things that we commission. And some of them, actually Valerie's work at Blue was a solution to a problem with one of our, we had this beautiful new school sitting atop a hill, and then there was this huge cooling tower that was an eyesore. So she was able to transform that concrete block on top of the hill into a beautiful mosaic, abstracted mosaic display. One side said Blue, the other side said 8 for Ward 8. Shade sculpture, wayfinding wayfinding installations, traditional figurative sculpture, That one on the bottom right is Stanley Agbantayan, a local artist who did a button mosaic with more than 1 million buttons. The UN secretary came by and was really happy to see his work there. So as you can see, just all kinds of things. Resin, we love resin for suspended because glass can be very heavy to install and a lot riskier. So again, why a Percent for Art program at DGS is because DC invests about $1 billion a year in construction. And it's important that artists are a part of that economy. We've built lots of peanut butter buildings for a long time with maybe one work of art. So having the artists in on the process during the design stage and also during construction not only enhances the artist's experience in working in the construction process, but it enhances our building portfolio exponentially in terms of aesthetics and the ability to visualize mission and the hopes of what is supposed to be going on in that building and what that building represents to that immediate community. That's Alberts and Tim Davis. They did a wonderful, so many may know that Tim Davis is a gallerist. So we do include gallerists as eligible participants in this program. But as Tim is now his own artist too, but he represented Alberts and a couple of other artists in this program, so gallerists are able to apply on behalf of artists. Our Percent for Art program is, I try to keep the boundaries not so high that it becomes discouraging. Public art can be a homogeneous field. It definitely needs to be diversified. So I do a lot of studio visits. I do a lot of talking to artists to convince them to participate in the public art realm because I feel like when you have greater cultural diversity in the public art submissions, you're going to have very strong concept in addition to aesthetics and design. It's nice to have a nice design that complements the architecture that's pleasant, but it's becomes more sublime experience for the visitor, for the employees who work there, when that art can speak to, have a strong meaning as far as mission and hope and aspiration. In only the way that artists can do. Let's see. So again, our applications are this year. It's one application online. It does go. We do convene a panel for each particular school. Why is that important? We want to make sure that the stakeholders of that particular building are the people who select the artwork. For a high school, you may have some high school art students on the panel in addition to the art teachers. I've found that the stakeholders do a really good job of selecting what their community wants. So when you are submitting, understand that when you go, if you're selected for round 2 site-specific proposal, you will have the traditional people on the panel, like the architect, who's always a very strong voice on the panel. But you also have the principal, and again, if it's a high school, you'll have possibly a couple of students, people from DC public school system, and DGS and the contractor. Okay, those are pretty generic points of why public art or percent for art is important for the DC modernization program and the goals of the city. Okay, so that is our link. I have printouts of the that page right there, so you can follow up. There are 4 different links, but they all lead to the same application. So I definitely encourage you to apply. We send out calls at least once a year for the schools and recreation centers, but we also do direct commissions. If I haven't seen your work, please share it. My email is sandy.bellamy@dc.gov. I'm always interested in meeting new artists and including them in our commissioning process.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And it's good to see artwork in my alma mater, Theodore Roosevelt High School.
Oh, yeah.
I have to go back and take a look. Zolna, introduce yourself and talk about your program.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Zolna Russell. I'm the Art and Transit Manager for the Purple Line. I'm also a landscape architect in my other life, so I get to facilitate art for the Purple Line and locate art in the rest of my life. So thank you for having me here today. I think the Purple Line program is kind of a crossover between the 2 programs we've already heard about. So we do have some fairly significant commissions. Unfortunately, we have already selected all of our artists for the Purple Line, so there won't be any future opportunities at this point, but I just wanted to kind of describe the program to you and tell you what we're doing. If you live anywhere near here, you probably have heard about the Purple Line or you're impacted by the construction of the Purple Line, and it has been a long process, and we still have a couple more years to go before completion, but we're definitely making some progress. So the Art and Transit program for the Purple Line started around 2012 with a master plan. The master plan was prepared by my predecessor, Joe Schneider, and that kind of established some mission for the Art and Transit program as well as goals. So here you see what the mission was that was established, and that is, first of all, to incorporate artwork into the Purple Line to make the light rail distinct in its design and artistic impact. The design of the standard features on the Purple Line, such as the windscreen, the platform, are all very uniform and branded across the line, and that is to create continuity across the line. So the artwork is really the opportunity to distinguish each and every station. Of course, incorporating artwork will enrich the aesthetics of the system. It's not intended to really replace good design. We think the other components are very well designed. We wanted to address FTA Circular 9401A, which requires public art as a part of mass transit projects. And probably most importantly for our program, we wanted to make connections to the communities and support neighborhood identities, because as I mentioned, the design of each station is fairly similar across the line, so we really wanted each station to reflect the community in which it is. And then this was all to be accomplished through a fair and equitable process. So after the master plan was established in September of 2014, a call for artists was issued, and this was national call for artists. It was posted on all the local websites, the State Arts Council, the local arts councils. It was advertised in all the public art magazines, and we got over 700 interested people, and these were international inquiries. In 2015, a selection committee narrowed down those 700 to 95 artists, and that was done by looking at all their portfolios. It was a several-week process, as you might imagine. The 95 artists were then invited to come to Maryland to meet the local communities. We hosted a number of Meet the Artist events, public meetings, and people were invited to come and talk to the artists. We also hosted a tour of the entire Purple Line for the artists, so they were also here to ask any questions about the program or the process. At that point, the 95 artists were paid a $3,500 stipend to prepare concepts. And in March 2017, the concepts were due back to the Purple Line Art and Transit Program. At that point, we had another series of public meetings where we actually took the concepts out and offered and solicited feedback from the public. So we had 2 to 3 concepts for each station, location, and the public gave us comments, and the proposals were also posted on the Purple Line and the Maryland Transit Administration websites. We solicited some feedback that way. Once we had all the public feedback, that was given to our final selection committee, which made the selection of the final 22 artists. There are 21 stations, so we have artwork at each station, and then the Littonsville station has 2 artists, and that is because there were 2 opportunities in the Littonsville area. The other one was at Rosemary Hills Elementary School. So when that was selected as a location, there was a wall there that was going to be a really great art opportunity, and when we went back to look at it, it turned out they had built an addition of the school right in front of that wall. So that art opportunity moved to the Littonsville station. So as with the GSA, our selection committee included members from the PLTC, which is the Purple Line Transit Constructors, the Maryland Transit Administration, local art professionals, a number of community members, and I know I'm missing somebody, but it was a very diverse selection committee, and the communities were represented in the final selection. So this is where we are at the moment. All of our 22 artists have been refining their proposals. We have received some additional community feedback, so we're incorporating those into the proposals. All the artists were given budgets for their stations, so we had to make sure that their art proposals were within budget. And in this case, the art and transit budget had to include everything that was not part of the original design. So for example, if an artist needs a foundation or additional electrical work as part of their installation, that all had to be taken out of their budget. In some cases, Purple Line Transit Constructors is actually installing that, but the money that's needed for that comes out of their budget. So there's been a lot of back and forth to establish what those things are, how much they might cost, and making sure we're within our final budget. So we are also developing contracts for our artists, which we're hoping to have completed within the next several months so they can move forward and begin to execute their artwork. So here's next steps. Artists are going to sign their contracts imminently and then work with PLTC design engineers and architects to implement their visions. The art and transit art is designated to be finalized between 2019 and 2021, and then 2020 and 2021 the artwork is installed. The artwork is going to be some of the last things that are going in as part of the Purple Line. As you can imagine, we don't want the artwork to be damaged in any way as they go through final tweaking of the stations and testing of the line. So it'll be a great unveil. The total art and transit budget for the Purple Line is $6,070,000, and this was established by MTA, the Maryland Transit Administration. That budget is evenly distributed between Prince George's and Montgomery counties, and then the Purple Line Art and Transit Program worked with MTA and Purple Line Transit Constructors to establish budgets for each of the stations. So, as I mentioned, the individual artist budgets have to include everything, including artist fees, all their materials costs, installation costs, and any consultants they might need. And the artists are given a lump sum fee to kind of deliver a complete package. And so, the overall art and transit budget also includes the stipends I mentioned that we paid. So we're we're hoping that we can get some fairly significant artworks out of this. Just to give you an idea, the budgets on each station range from about $90,000 to $350,000. So the budgets were established based on things like ridership and an understanding of the space and the actual opportunities at each station based on the station design itself. The Purple Line is designed to have as small a footprint as possible. So in many cases, the station designs are extremely efficient. So that means there's not a lot of opportunity for artists to put things on the platform, for example. So many of the artworks are kind of integrating into some of the features that are already on the station, such as fences, the windscreens, things like that. And since we haven't signed the contracts, I can't really show you all the artworks, but I just wanted to throw this up as a sample of one of the graphics that we received from the artists Katie and Jesse. So I also wanted to mention about 40% of our artists are from Maryland, either from this local DC metro area, Baltimore. So we have a really good representation of local artists, which I think is very significant given that we had started with 700 entries, internationally known artists. And of those artists, almost 40% of them are local, and that wasn't a priority in the selection. They were all selected on the merit of their work. So I think that really speaks to the strength of our local art community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's good to get the opportunity to see a whole process all the way through and the different steps and how you, as a public artist, can be a part of that process. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about Prince George's County. So I'm going to have Rhonda come up and talk about the program she runs in Prince George's County, and then we will end with my talking about the program that I run, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Rhonda?
You know, I think I'm going to sit here.
Okay,
I'm
that's
very
fine.
comfortable. I'm getting used to the prompter. So, yes, as Alex said, we are in a county that's very supportive of public art. It's a very exciting time. There are conversations that are going on at different levels of leadership, municipalities, our new county executive. So it really is a great time in Prince George's County for artists, the arts communities, and public art. So the Prince George's Arts and Humanities Council, so we manage the county's 1% Art in Public Places program, which is a legislated program by the county government, very similar to the structure of what Sandy was speaking to and Jennifer was speaking to. We have an Art in Public Places panel that is appointed by the county executive, that we coordinate their activities, and we also serve as the project manager, working with the artists from contracting to fabrication to final installation. And so for the selection in these programs, there's a series of process of review, an RFQ is released, community meetings, and so we want everyone here to stay tuned for some of the great projects that are coming down the pike. So just to highlight a few of the projects, this is the Laurel Branch Library. This particular project won the Distinguished American Institute of Architects Awards for 2018. We had 2 installations in this Laurel Branch Library design concept. One is Washington Glass. The other one, as you can see, Martha Jackson Jarvis working on her piece. One of the latest installations was Alan Benstock with the New Carrollton Branch Library. One of the other things that the Arts and Humanities Council has developed is a program around environmental public art, and this is a program in partnership with the Department of the Prince George's Department of Environment. And so our first installation was in front of our headquarters at 1801 McCormick Drive, and we plan to expand that program. one of the things that the Arts and the Humanities Council does, we are a bold advocate as far as engaging our artists in the major development projects that are going on in the county, particularly with private developers. So the Arts and Humanities Council, we were the collaborating agency with MGM National Harbor as the with their local arts program. So this is Margaret Boozer's work that's at the hotel at MGM National Harbor. We have Ron Beverly's work. There were a total of 7 artists that were commissioned or direct procurements of art were made in total within MGM National Harbor. University of Maryland, the hotel, this is a part of the reception that is going to take place at the closing of today's session. This is Jeremy Flick's work. There are a total of 101 pieces of local art in their public art collection. All of them are local artists. You have Rush Baker IV here. This is part of his work. And as far as new projects that are coming on the horizon for FY19, Hyattsville Branch Library is one of the up-and-coming Art in Public Places projects that is on the schedule to be released shortly. We also have Surratt's Clinton Branch Library, the Bladensburg Branch Library. So all of these RFQs will be uploaded on our website, www.pghc.org. Sandy, I like your idea of the one application. I think I'm going to go back to my team and talk about that. And as I said, the Arts and Humanities Council, we are champions for artist engagement in all the economic development programs, our transit-oriented development projects. This is a New Carrollton Metro project where there's a public art strategy that's being developed with that, in tandem with the Purple Line, where there is a commission that has been awarded for New Carrollton as well. Suitland Town Center is another development project that has a public art strategy. And one of the projects that I'm very excited about is downtown Prince George's County, which is going to be in Largo. And there are several stakeholders that are involved, very interested in engaging creative activations. You have the new University of Maryland Regional Medical Center, RPAI, which is doing the Capitol Boulevard redesign. UMUC has a Largo campus, and also the Largo Metro and our new Wayne K. Curry County Administration Building. So we will be updating all the new projects that are coming on site. We want everyone to apply. So check our website, once again, www.pgac.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. So let me go. I will talk briefly about our projects for the Prince George's Parks and Recreation. This is a listing of where we have sites of the various art works, and I'm going to give you several public art samples. Our budgets for our projects can range anywhere from $10,000 or $15,000 to about $350,000. This was a smaller budget project. I think it was maybe about $14,000, $15,000, and it's a mosaic by Liza and Alan Linder. Our projects, we try to have public engagement as much as possible. And so we had some pizza and Coke and Coca-Cola and brought kids in, and we even had the basketball players in there cutting tiles on the works. They were so engaged in that, and so that was a wonderful thing to have happen. We have temporary work also on exhibition, and you see Alan's work here. So Alan Benstock, who's in the audience. This is at our Aviation Museum. This is one of the first projects I worked on, Beacon and Butterfly Tree, and we have Judy Sutton Moore here who did the Butterfly Tree, which was a major installation in that building. I think we have about 4 artworks there. We have internal artworks. This is on your left. It is an interactive work. People can bring in their phones and their iPads, and they can interact with that piece to tell them about things that are happening in the building, things that are happening on the rooftop where they have some kind of green installation. So that's an interactive piece. And then the one to the right there is the Viper heliotrope, which is also an interactive piece where it's a big video monitor, and as people move around, the images change. They can program it so that if the raindrops are coming on the building, they can also be programmed in to present images. William Beanes Community Center, this is a glass project we did with Washington Glass Studio for the exterior. And we did a piece also for the interior, the Suitland Bog, imagining, I guess right close to that location is the Suitland Bog, which is supposed to be a very unique entity throughout the United States. And so the artist took images of plant life at the bog and then translated that into art and into glass. Laurel Beltsville Senior Activity Center, I hope you can see that in it. This is an artwork, a glass work that was done to commemorate donors for the building. So we had that done for that building, and it was very, very well received. And I can't leave without a Martha Jackson Jarvis piece. So Westphalia Community Center, Green Pastures, and you see to the left the dedication ceremony for that. You'll hear later on challenges for project. This was a very, very, very challenging project, but it came through. Martha came through for us, and it was a real winner. We have a new project coming up called SARC. There are 3, those dots indicate 3 areas where there will be artwork, one on the outside, one in the entryway, and one at the ceiling. And you can see where it's going to be in the ceiling and on the wall. And we have 2 of the artists with us today, and that's the plans for that building. It's a really big project. I think for that whole total project, it's a budget of about $650,000. Coming soon, Peppermill Community Center, that's in progress. Tucker Road Ice Rink, Southern Area Technology and Recreation Center Natatorium, Rolling Crest Community Center, Park Police Headquarters, and the Marlow Heights Community Center. These are projects that will be coming up. Now, at the break time at lunch, I will have some cards to give to you, and you can, it has 2 purposes. One purpose is an evaluation of what you see here. Also, number 2, any workshops you'd like to see done for artists. We're collecting ideas for that. And number 3, it's a way for me to put you on my registry so that whenever we do a call, your information is available. So now I'm going to hush, and I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And the mic is right here, so feel free to line up at the mic. And where's my timekeeper, Jillian? Oh, okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And would you lift it up a little bit, Tara?
Okay.
Thanks.
Can you hear me? Okay, so my question is, each of you all spoke around what your typical investments are to initially commission the pieces. So how do your agencies handle once you have the piece? How do you maintain and preserve it? What funding remains available to continue to keep the pieces beautiful? And do you actively engage the commissioned artists in keeping their work up to what they envisioned initially?
We actually plan for that from the beginning. The funds that we spend are capital funds, so they are not held off to deal with future conservation. But we have a conservator meeting with the artist as the project's being developed. We do installation documentation, so we know exactly what we have, and I send a conservator immediately afterwards to do a baseline assessment, develop a cyclic maintenance plan, and then to have a projection of the major conservation we can anticipate in the future. I receive separate funds annually and have national conservation contracts. So every artwork has to be inspected every 2 years to ensure. They used to disappear. I mean, artwork would disappear, big things. But now they don't. And every 2 years we get an assessment by the person who's at the facility, just telling us what they see in the artwork. We then follow up with conservation assessments and treatment recommendations. Some of that I fund directly. Others, if there's going to be a project at a facility, so if I know a major modernization is coming, or even a smaller scale project, I will have some of those funds to do the conservation. So we have a comprehensive plan to manage the whole collection. And we rate things on a scale of 1 to 5. The goal is to always have everything at least a 3, and the condition of the collection overall keeps improving.
Tara, I'm glad you raised that question because the issue of conservation is one that we're going to have a separate, it won't be a full conference, but it will be a workshop, and Howard's in the audience, and I've talked to him about doing that. He conserved a piece, I think, 5 years ago here on the campus of the University of Maryland University College. So I'm going to pull together a team of conservators to talk to artists about what kind of, if your work is in a certain state, what it needs to be in to be a public art piece. Because oftentimes the expectation is that the artwork for public art lasts, at least 15, 25 years or so? Because oftentimes the way that the funds are raised for public art is through bond issuance. So if they're still paying on the bond and the artwork is dead, that doesn't work. So the expectation in public art is that conservation issues are taken care of, and it's important that organizations include in their budgets enough money to do the conserving work.
Exactly. I just wanted to add to that. That was one of the pieces when I started working with public art within the county, that we did not have an allocated maintenance fund. And I was receiving inquiries from locations that are saying the public art is in disarray. So one of the processes that I put in place for each contract, for each funding allocation, we reserve 2 to 3%, depending on the complexity of the project, that stays in the fund to perpetuity. To be used for maintenance types issues. And it's something that needs to be estimated on the front end. It can't be an afterthought. The other thing in our contracts, we require that the artists create a manual of maintenance as part of their contract that we not only keep on file, but we also do a debriefing with the whoever is working within the site where the installation is taking place, and we find that that's helpful as well. So you raise a very important issue that we still need to continue to talk about to make sure that maintenance is a part of the entire process.
Right.
And I was going to add, you had asked about involving artists in conservation, and artists aren't conservators. And so in the contracts, it actually talks about the government's responsibility to maintain the integrity of the artwork.
That's right.
It's on us, and the conservators do the work, but we involve the artists. So the conservators or our office would be in touch with the artist to say, here is the plan, we ask for their concurrence. Because just painting over something doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And so there have been instances that we had panels on a border station in Alaska that had withstood terrible weather for several decades. And the conservator went back to the artist because he knew that she was much more knowledgeable about the wood and the pigments than he would ever be. And so it varies, but a conservator is responsible.
All righty. Are there any more questions? Because we're going to wrap up this session. We want to catch up a little time. I just want to say to the artists, be sure that you sign up for the different registries that were mentioned today. These presenters, I think, are going to be available for a little while today. So be sure that you get on and participate. I was so pleased with your comment, Sandy, about how new artists to public art can get in the game. And this is pretty much what this is about, demystifying the whole process of getting into public art, because it is the wave of the future, I think, the present and the future. So I would like to thank our panelists, give them a round of applause.